Hello HEMA friends and welcome to this new video. If you had ever give a look to medieval fencing manual, you will probably know that they tend to be hard to translate into real combat at first glance. And that's because they have been wrote in another language. And here I am not talking about Latin, German or Italian. I am talking about a language useful to translate movements into images and writings. In today's society, if you want to show a movement, you simply shoot a video with your camera or with your phone, and to send a proper explanation of a movement to a friend, you simply need a few hours, minutes or even just seconds sometimes. But back in the 14th century, representing the movement was indeed a complex task. But during the years, an incredibly good and well-thought method ended up being created and refined. A method made of cuts, thrusts and of course guards. When we start looking at these tools represented in the manuals, everything seems pretty straightforward. The guards are the starting position of certain blows. Some guards are better than others at landing certain attacks, and that's actually true. But, funny enough, this doesn't clear out how guards, or poste, or custodie, should be conceptually perceived in the complex, ever-changing reality of a fight. At the very beginning of the 133, the most ancient medieval manual that we know by now, we may find the most important clue about the way in which we should think about guards. A simple couple of lines which states a really important concept. Quote, "Note that the art of combat is described as follows. Combat is the organization of various blows and it is divided in 7 parts as here." The 133 tells this while presenting us the 7 guards. But why? Why is he talking about blows when he shows us the 7 guards? Aren't guards some kind of position we are meant to sit in while starting the fight and from which our attacks should start from? Well, actually, no, or at least, not really. The 133 tells us a really important truth which should be kept in mind while thinking about the concept of guard. There is not such a thing as a guard position per se. There is instead the starting as well as the ending position of our movements. And that's what actually a guard is. The guard, conceptually speaking, exists only in relation to the movements it is able to generate. In fact, while trying to develop this concept further, the 133 shows us a ton of different positions, variations of the 7 guards, halfway position between them, and so on. The goal behind this huge variety of positions is not just showing us just another tricky position to start from to use once in a while, but in fact, it was the tentative to explain movement much more in detail. A lot of medieval manuals, like Fiore, 133 or Vadi, even the early Bolognese tradition during the Renaissance period, uses the same method to describe the art of fighting. We can do an abstraction of this method by talking about dots and lines. The dots are the guards and are used to show the various key points of the movement patterns preferred by specific masters. They represent a series of coordinates useful to triangulate the motion in relation to our human figure. The lines instead are the cuts, thrusts and all the other movements useful to fight properly. These lines are meant to be used to connect the dots in a variety of different ways, to create an unbelievably huge amount of forms in the space. And these forms are of course our techniques. And well, actually this is not too much of an abstraction, because in most of these manuals we may find a diagram which actually represents this rather simple but incredibly important concept. This diagram probably appeared in the 14th century, and it was most probably an innovation if compared to the 133. And most probably it should be used to help us connecting the dots, if you know what I mean. The historical plays instead, the last part of the medieval pedagogic method, are just mere examples, good hints on what is generally better in some archetypes of cases. But the biggest chunk of fighting is created using dots and lines. using the plays, our archetypes, only as broad guidelines. The plays are all about the interaction with the opponent, about tactics, about measure, about concept like strong and weak. The plays are also used to represent all the situations which can't be represented by our system of dots and lines, like for example strato actions or blade grabs, while instead our dots and lines are all about the actual application form of our sword techniques, the series of movements that our body has to follow while landing the action. Of course, what I just described to you is my way of looking at the manuals, which, in my opinion, better fits the ever-changing nature of fighting, which our ancestors knew very well. Very good people, if you have any question about this video or other ones, just write it down in the comment section. I will try to answer them in the future Q&A videos. And remember that if you want to see more of my content, you may think about joining my Patreon community. Link in the description as always, and by the way, a big thank you to all my patrons who are supporting me in my HEMA adventure. Thanks for watching people, and as always, see you next time.